We've a lot of really interesting speakers today, and we're going to look at biodiversity in relation to culture and social well-being. So it should be quite diverse and quite interesting. So without further ado, I'm going to call up Paddy Woodworth. Paddy you'll probably know as a journalist and an author and lecturer, and he's going to speak about work he does with the group Sanctuary in Nature and Heritage. Thanks, Paddy. It's your time.
Thanks, Lorcan. I need to know how to use the clicker. Is it straightforward to go forward? Yeah. That seems grand. Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. Very good to be here. And I'm particularly happy to be on a panel with people like Brendan Dunford and Brian Dunne and the other panellists who I don't know as well. But I think we're set up for hopefully a good session where I hope there'll be lots of time for discussion. So I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can. Our project, and I say our project because I'm very happy that Mohammed Ashur, who I didn't expect to be here because he's applying for citizenship as we speak, and that's a difficult process, has actually managed to join us today. So it's a project that I started just after I met Mohammed first, but I started called Sanctuary in Nature, and our mission is to offer opportunities to asylum seekers, refugees, migrants, people in the direct provision process especially, to offer them opportunities to engage with the Irish landscape, and now, thanks to Mohammed's intervention, also with the Irish built environment, built heritage. And also, and this is a very important part of what we do, I think we sometimes fail at it, we do our best, to invite them to share their own stories and images of nature and heritage from their countries of origin. Because we see this not as some kind of gift from us to them, we see it as an exchange between equals. Like everybody else, this image and many others, and working in Spain a lot, I've been very aware of the number of migrants who are still dying daily trying to get into Europe. And I don't have a political answer to the migration crisis, but I am disgusted by the failure of our political classes to develop one. But it seemed, I finally decided against my former political instincts that it may be sometimes better to light one candle than curse the dark, though perhaps we need to curse the dark a lot as well too. So I got involved with the Sanctuary movement through my friend and Irish Times colleague Andy Pollock, is very involved in this area. And the Sanctuary movement, again, its aims are a focus on ensuring the process of working for a culture of hospitality, welcome and inclusion will benefit all migrant groups as well as host communities. And as I listened to people talking about universities of sanctuary, sanctuary and faith groups, schools of sanctuary, I suddenly thought, well, what do I know most about, if I know about anything? It's nature, and it's kind of become a commonplace at many biodiversity conferences I attend, natural capital conferences I attend, that the benefits of nature to our physical and mental health are really enormous and quantifiable, and unquantifiable as well. And so we found this to be very true. This is one of the Albanian children out with us with a Birdwatch Ireland fluffy toy. And they're running through the woods in Phoenix Park. I mean, it really is a no-brainer that, as the Taoiseach quite eloquently expressed this morning about his own home places, that we do feel benefits from being in nature. And you kind of think of people living in the very mixed conditions of direct provision. Direct provision isn't always terrible. It's sometimes reasonably good. I don't think it's a good system, but the actual conditions can be not bad. But people feel cooped up, people feel isolated from Irish communities and Irish landscapes. So we started this, or I started it, with really kind of informal nature walks, excuse me, from Mosney Direct Provision Centre, which happens to be very close to Sonarta National Ecology Centre. And Sonarta have been a great ally from day one as a kind of base, because we can easily get there, even if the days before we could hire buses and we just had a couple of cars, it was easy to ferry a few people. It's only 4 or 5k from from the Direct Provision Centre to Sonata, where people could see heritage apple orchards, they could bird watch along an estuary, they could walk in woodland, learn about Irish native trees. And in the early days, we had participants from Syria, Albania, Uganda, South Africa, and indeed China as a volunteer. And one of the significant things, I think, has been that, you know, all of our volunteers are also new Irish sometimes, which I think is helpful. And then we began to kind of gather numbers, and we began to find that people were really, really willing to help us. So I used to do some bird monitoring in Rogerstown for Birdwatch Ireland, and I rang people in the Fingal branch, and we visited the hides in Fingal with help from Birdwatch Ireland. But there were also days when, you know, only 2 people came out. And I think those days are important as well. I mean, that was actually a very good day. We had a lovely walk, a Mongolian woman and her child, and a Chinese volunteer and her child. And little Mongolian boy was entranced with what he was finding on the beach. And I think this is really important. This beach is right outside Mosney where he lives. He could go there every day, but he didn't know that until then. You know, there wasn't, you know, refugees are confused, traumatized, and often don't realize what may be almost literally on their doorstep. And then during this period, Mohammed who was already involved in sports projects with Dublin City of Sanctuary, and when he heard about our project, he began to attend, and he rapidly became a kind of right-hand person, and whenever I needed help with anything like getting a group across a road or getting chairs out or something, Mohammed was always there. And after a while, he began to talk to me about the feedback he was getting. From the guests, and particularly he was also bringing along his own Syrian network, which meant our numbers began to grow very rapidly. And he said, you know, people love the nature aspect, but people are also very curious about Irish built heritage, about, you know, perhaps important historic sites, historic buildings. And Mohammed happens to be an architect and had just been visiting Castletown House. And he said, could we go to Castletown House and see the house, and then we could do the nature walk in the grounds? So really, I think in that conversation on the bus, I said, well, like, okay, if we're going to do this, I'm going to need a partner. Will you be my partner in the project? And we'll change the name of it to Sanctuary in Nature and Heritage. So it's now both. We've also, as I say, we've got incredible support. Run through them very quickly here because they all deserve to be mentioned. Fingal County Council, the OPW, the artist Garrett Phelan, Birdwatch Ireland, Birds Connect. I don't know, I have it with me, but I haven't time to show it to you now, but you probably know the laminated 50 top Irish birds identification kit that they produced. So they came along, Andrew Lynch came along and shared that. Zoe Devlin gave us free copies of her Wildflower book. And who else helped? The Heritage Council, of course, I must mention, and they have been extremely generous supporters, and I hope will continue to be. And Gurley Bog Mehel, Meath Partnership, we're working with them on several projects now. Christchurch Cathedral, Zoe Devlin, Trinity College. But in all this flurry of activity, the pandemic happens. And what do you do about excursions and buses together during a pandemic? Well, you obviously simply can't do it. So we struggled with this for a while, and we began, I don't think either, well, I'm not going to try and tar Mohammed with the same bad brush as myself, but I'm certainly pretty inept on social media. And we tried posting stuff on social media, you know, images of the spring, that strange first pandemic spring. I don't know how many people we reached with that. So we decided to put together a package, and the author, Michael Fewer, very kindly donated 2 of his books. Aidan Heron donated his book about Ardgillan Castle. And we also included in the package a hand lens, because I find the hand lens absolutely invaluable for introducing children to things like orchids, for example. You show any child refugee or Irish, you show them an orchid and they'll say, what? Because they've seen orchids in supermarkets. And with a hand lens, they suddenly realize, my God, it is a magnificent flower. So the hand lens has been an important tool. So we gave out this package as best we can to everybody we could still reach and knew where they were, because people move around in this system. And parents began to send us photographs of their children reading Michael's books. So we did stay in touch with people that way. And how am I for time, Lorcan? And then we began to expand after the pandemic very rapidly. And increasing numbers of guests now. We're at kind of at 150 plus, maybe closer to 200 on our guest list from many different countries and volunteers from many different countries. We've been getting some media coverage from Wings, the Birdwatch magazine, from the Irish Times, from Connemara Radio. And we're getting contacts from over the country, people who would like to participate with us. We got a very generous grant this year from the Community Integration Fund. We've also explored art and nature. Mohammed and who was an artist as well as an architect, and Kate Kavanagh, one of our most active volunteers, have worked on art projects with kids, which sometimes continue on Zoom after excursions. Making Daisy change, one of the things we're looking for is connections with people. One of the strange things about Making Daisy change is we found that it didn't exist in any of the cultures that we brought along on that particular day, and people were fascinated by it. It was actually hard to stop them. So what have we learned? Food is very important. You've got to have a meal every day, and it's a great way to socialise. Games and visual aids are very useful. Hand lens, yes, but you can get a few hand lenses, binoculars and telescopes, but they can slow things up a bit. And I would say what we do in terms of nature and biodiversity is broad stroke. It's about bringing people into the environment. And so you're looking at ducks on an estuary. You're not necessarily distinguishing every widgeon from every teal. You know, it's not about a real birding outing or a real botanical outing, but we are drawing people's attention to things, or, you know, introducing them to 5 native trees on a walk, things like that. Sharing stories is essential. The last trip, a couple from Mauritius were fascinating. They talked about the dodo as a bird they no longer have, and then they talked about teak. And I didn't know this, but there is only one, Matthew may correct me on this, but there's only one mature teak tree remaining on Mauritius. So you share stories like that. Or sometimes I remember one of the very early ones with the Syrians. We asked them about nature in Syria, some young men, and one of them said, well, the rose is our national flower. And so, you know, it can come that way. But I remember an elderly Syrian man talking very movingly about how he missed his expeditions every spring to a valley full of flowers. Next step, do we go nationwide? I think Mohammed and I are reluctant to try and set up a national organisation. So what we're trying to do is kind of throw out seeds, tell people who want to know about what we've done, and see if they can do it locally. And we are already in touch with actually somebody from the Wicklow Uplands Council, Moira, who's involved in a network in Wicklow, and she's been sending people from Wicklow on our excursions, and we may do something in Wicklow. I don't know what's happened there, because the last... So I just do want to get to the last slide, if I may, because you might, if you want to find out more, yeah, those are our emails and websites, etc. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Paddy. That's great. And in my own work with the Heritage Council, we do help and support with Paddy's work, and it is so rewarding. They're such a brilliant group to work with, and I think we get more out of it than they do often. Okay, your programme will show next that we had a presentation from Audrey Tormey, who is also involved in a programme with the Heritage Council and the National Council for the Blind of Ireland. Unfortunately, Audrey couldn't make it today. So that'll give us a few more question times, hopefully, at the far end. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Dr. Brendan Dunford to come and present to us. Brendan, you'll know through the Burren Bio and Burren life project. We've been working with the Heritage Council and Burren Bio project for many years now, 2 decades I heard someone say, so it flies in a heartbeat. Thank you very much, Brendan.
And thanks everybody for coming along this morning. I know there's lots of interesting presentations, and it's good to be with you, and I've got about 15 minutes to compact about 20 years worth of work. So it's going to be a hold on tight, and I hope you enjoy it. I'd just like to begin by thanking, like a lot of people. As Lorcan said, we get a lot of good PR in the Burren for the work we've done with farmers and the Burren programme, but there's so many people involved, including a great farm leader, Michael Daverin, and an even better woman beside him, his wife Liz, but also the Heritage Council, who supported us from day one to a phenomenal extent. And a great team of people who are just committed to a place and to making that place a better place for one and all. So I'd like to credit all those people to begin with, because I'll probably forget it as I go along. So what I wanted to do is talk about, I've been given the theme, supporting communities in biodiverse rural locations. And guess what? The Burren is a biodiverse rural location. It's a beautiful place. It's this wonderful karst landscape in the midwest of Ireland. It's got a lot of biodiversity, obviously 70% of our native flora and fauna, but a very rich cultural heritage, both living and, I suppose, in terms of the archaeology, built heritage as well. It's just layer upon layer of human activity, of biodiversity, of geological wonder, and of history and heritage as well. So it's a very magical place. It's a place some people might find surprising. It's not a national park. There is a national park in the Burren, but the vast majority of the landscape is privately owned farmland. And it's a place where people live and make a living. And this is why my late wife Anne and I set up a little organisation called Burren Bio, to tell people that this is a living landscape. It's not a fossilised entity. And to look after it into the future, we need to make sure that the living is kept on, and those traditions, as per the Michael driving his cattle onto the mountain, that they're maintained into the future. So what I wanted to do this morning is share some of the experience we've gained over the last 20 years. And, you know, we struggle all the time. Every day is a struggle, you know, but we're lucky. We're making progress all the time, which makes it manageable. But I just wanted to share with you some ideas that you can take home yourselves around community stewardship. Act Now for Biodiversity is the title of this conference. So I'm just going to focus on 2 words, act now. What can each and every one of you in the audience do for biodiversity in your landscape? It doesn't have to be the Burren, it can be anywhere. So I'm going to share with you 10 sort of ideas about things that you can do to support biodiversity in Ireland. And I'd just like to say, like the work that I'm privileged to do as a guest in the Burren is to try and engage and support communities to become stewards of their own place. So our model is that communities take ownership of their heritage and its care. So that's the model that we're working on. And after 20 years, I've come to the conclusion that it's about 3 things. No matter where you are or who you're dealing with, it's going to be about the pocket. There has to be financial incentive in many cases. Secondly, it's about how to farm for nature, how to work for nature, how to do things for nature. There's a lot in that, or for heritage as well. And the heart. So we can throw money at a problem, it won't solve it. We can throw money and advice at a problem, it'll help a little bit more. But if you can get all 3 together, the pocket, the head and the heart, that's when the magic actually happens. And I just wanted to show you examples of that, because I'm not making it up. This is based on experience. So here's some 10 ideas. First of all, investing in our heritage. I mean, we have a real urgent crisis on at the moment, but education is still a great investment. And for us, it's all about reconnecting people with their place. We've lost the connection, become urbanised, we've become digital. We need to reconnect with their place, and we've been doing that for 20 years. Amazing programmes in the Burren, but we're not selfish people. So with the support of the Heritage Council, we're starting to share that now across Ireland in a new programme, which isn't showing for me at the moment. My clicker isn't working. Yeah, I'm pressing the right, but it's not working down, so maybe there you go. Called Heritage Keepers. So this is where we spend 5 modules working with communities or schools, secondary schools or primary schools, helping them to explore their place, figure out what's wonderful about it in terms of biodiversity or archaeology or geography, and then at the end of it, providing them with a little fund, €1,000, so they can take action for their place. Education isn't enough anymore, we need action. So we're trying to help these kids and communities to become agents of action, agents of change. So now this thing is playing up on me again. If somebody's, okay, great. Secondly, here's some simple ideas anybody can do. By the way, with Heritage Keepers, we're hoping to be open for applications from communities across Ireland next year. So that's one thing you can do. get interested in that and buy into it. Secondly, building engaged and inclusive communities. Have a monthly walk. For the last 12 years now in the Burren, every month, the first Sunday of every month at 2 o'clock, we have a walk in the Burren, usually led by a farmer and a local maybe butterfly expert or an archaeologist or something. An incredible location to get an insight into your local heritage and to empower those that farm the landscape with the sense that they're important, their role is important. We have a tea talk where you come for a cup of tea this is during winter time, you come for a cup of tea around 7:30, and at 8:30 while you're still drinking and chatting, we have a talk about archaeology or some aspect of our heritage. Again, going into those rural spaces to help people learn more about their place. They've been fantastic. They don't cost anything. Volunteering. Why not get set up a little volunteering group in your community to go explore your archaeology or to do litter picks or things like that, to build a community around conservation and around heritage. It's something we can all do, and it doesn't cost a penny to do it. Celebration is a wonderful way to get people on board with our heritage. So years ago, we set up a little festival called the Burren Winters Festival. And the high point is where we get one farming family and they take their cattle herd up the mountain. So you can see the amount of people all the way back to here following it. That's a way for people to get an insight into farming, that farming isn't just about food production, but it's about sustaining cultures and communities and landscapes as well. And it's just a lovely way to bring people together. Likewise, every May we celebrate Burn and Bloom, and every spring we celebrate the learning potential of all of our landscapes. So come along and attend some of those events, or set one up yourself in your place. What's special about your place that can be celebrated or acknowledged? Bringing people together around heritage. We set up another little project there recently in Burren PO with support from Clare County Council and the Department of Ag called the Harris Corner. There's an old expression in Ireland for that little patch of ground where you couldn't manage too intensively, so it was kind of left for nature. It could have been a slope or a little corner of a field. So we've taken that concept and offered people microfunding. It's only usually around €600 or €700, and advice and support as to how you can do a little bit for nature. So put in a farm pond. You can put in a little mini native woodland with these beautiful native pines, or you can put in an orchard from seed savers. Simple things, but they're the first step on the ladder for a lot of people. We've had a phenomenal response for that. We just had a second call for applications in Clare last week. And this is 30 ponds built in the course of 2 or 3 months right across Clare by landowners and community groups and citizens. People are hungry for a bit of support, and it's not the money, it's the advice on, well, where do I put the pond without damaging something else, or what kind of liner do I need, or what kind of plants. So there's an appetite that we're tapping into, and that's coming to a county near you soon, so keep an eye out for that. Another little idea we've piloted is, there was a reference to yesterday from Philip Boucher-Hayes, we're not talking to the people we need to talk to. Our messengers around conservation and heritage are all wrong. Why don't we hear from the farmers who are doing great things? So a few years ago, we set up the Farm for Nature Ambassadors Programme, where we're highlighting amazing farmers who day in, day out are walking the walk. We're great at talking the talk, but how many of us are prepared to walk the walk? We've identified these people. This is a local hero of mine, Philomena Hines. She just passed away 2 years ago. She loved her land, she loved her livestock, and she was an exemplary farmer in terms of nature conservation and an inspiration to the community. And since then, for the last 5 years, with Board B's support, we've identified farmers like that right across Ireland who are doing extraordinary things for nature, who are reducing chemical use, who are promoting mob grazing systems. Amazing people. We'd love to have them here at this event, but hopefully next time around. So this is about changing the message to a more positive one, a more empowering and enabling and inclusive one. And it's something, again, we'd like you to nominate farmers that you know for this little network. That's something you can do. Moving on, we talk about science and knowledge and the need for research. Absolutely. But what about all the inherent knowledge that's there out in the community at the moment? Why not tap into that? So we've been doing that through online fora, farm walks. There's farm walks today, every weekend for the rest of the summer. Please go on one of those farm walks. It's the most wonderful learning experience that you'll ever find. It's fantastic. Or if you want to go on an online forum, or a website or webinar or podcasts, there's some beautiful podcasts which really bring you into the farm and bring you into nature. So tap into those, farmingfornature.ie. So engage with that community if you can. And then I wanted to get on to the stuff that we get an awful lot of credit for. But all of the work of the Burren programme is underpinned by that engagement with the farming community enabled by Burren Bio Trusts and Farming for Nature and other organisations. So years ago, we introduced a result-based payment system. This is back in 2010 for farmers. Because farmers hate being told what to do. And aren't they right? Try telling him what to do. So why not just tell farmers what we want and let them deliver it? And if they want it delivered, they will, and they'll get paid for it. 3 different scenarios, 3 fields in the Burren. One of them wrecked 0 out of 10, no money for him. One of them barely managed at all, 4 out of 10, no money for him. This one, a lot of work, grazing, managing stock, keeping water sources clean, keeping invasive species back. Fantastic outcome. The farmer decides how to do it, when to do it, if he wants to do it or she wants to do it. And if they do so, we pay them accordingly. What nature loves about this is every farmer in every field is doing something different all the time. So it's diversity, and nature loves diversity. There's a great expression, keep the countryside complex. This is what this is all about, keeping the countryside complex, because that's what nature means. But to deliver those outcomes, you need to do conservation support work. There's a great example yesterday of farmers coming together to remove rhododendron over in the Delphi Valley, but we farmers coming together to remove invasive species like hazel or blackthorn. Farmers coming together or individually fixing up polluted water points and building rainwater catchers or putting in solar pumps. Or farmers repairing something like 40 kilometres of stone wall have been repaired in the Burren over the last number of years so they can get grazers back onto the landscape. So it's creating a little industry around nature conservation, and who better to do than the people on the ground. And there's another lovely example of that, the offshoot industries generated by community stewardship of landscapes. So people building local gates, teams coming together. We've had a lot of farmers now leading walks and getting paid for it, and the reviews from the participants have been phenomenal because you get an insight that is completely unique into the landscape. So seeing nature, not just because of its obviously natural credits, but also as an economic opportunity and as a social opportunity as well. That's all out there. Any of you can organise things like that in your community if you want. Finally, number 10, working with local communities, there's a great sense of pride in the local place, and there's a real frustration having to get on the phone to Wexford if the Department of Ag are there, or headquarters in Dublin or whatever. So keeping it local has been really important to us. This is where I've lived, Michael, for the last 12 or 14 years in a little office here in Carlin in central Burren. And having that local presence around nature is critically important. So if you're a dairy farmer or a beef farmer, you'll go to your Teagasc office, which will be in the local town. But where do you go if you're in a high nature value farm landscape for advice around nature? You can ask your peers, which is a good idea, or in the Burren you can come to us and we'll sort out the paperwork, we'll sort out the problems so you can get on with what you're good at, which is the farming of the landscape. So localising it is really important. And the nice thing about it, just to finish off, is it really does work. It can be done. We hear all about negative stories, but this is data. There's about 2,000 fields across the Burren that we score every year. And 2010, when we began, the score was about 6.8. And gradually, this is across all the fields and all the farms in our area, which is about 23,000 hectares. The score has been going up. The environmental outcomes have been getting better and better and better all the time. And that shows that this kind of thing can work. Continual improvement since 2010, 12 years are running. And that means moving from situations like this to situations like that. And when you evaluate it, you can actually put a value on it, about 33 million euros worth of biodiversity benefits since 2010. And not just biodiversity benefits, but social benefits. There's a kind of greater belief in what you do now as a farmer, that you're relevant to society's needs. And again, Michael will always say that farmers will deliver what society wants. If society wants biodiversity and to capture carbon, farmers will do that. But let's reward them, let's support them, and let's encourage them as well that this is the right thing to do. And the lovely thing about it is that the Burren story has kind of spread through this EIP funding in the last CAP. And now the biggest opportunity we've probably ever had in Ireland for nature conservation is the Department of Agriculture, who, much as we might criticise them, are European leaders through this cooperation project. So from Donegal all the way down to Kerry, so most of the high nature value farmland in Ireland now will be farmed in accordance with these principles of paying farmers for their environmental outcomes, for their ecosystem services, having local offices to support the farmers to do that. This is revolutionary. It's a huge challenge, but it could be a game changer for nature conservation in Ireland. And that's, again, hopefully the next few years we'll have it. I think I'm really out of time, so just a quick example of a farmer, Oliver Nagelny's farm. He's got a small farm, but over time he's increased his stocking levels by 20%. He's getting a premium payment because his fields are so well managed. He's getting good money every year for his ecosystem services. He's got local contractors out doing the work for him. He pays them. He's got local guys making gates in his farm. He's got study tours of other farmers coming to look at the work he's done to protect his water sources. He's developed new feeding systems on the farm. He's repaired kilometres of walls. That farm is in tip-top shape for the next generation that are coming through, and he's so proud of that. He's the only farmer that we have scores 10 out of 10 in all his fields. He even hosted Prince Charles on his visit to Ireland. Charles wanted to see this programme, and we took him to this amazing farm. So again, it can be done, and he's an inspiration to others in the community as well. So finally, this is just going back to the start and our relationship with the Heritage Council. This is a little picture I took about 12 years ago, and I think it's nice to end with the story, but I was in there doing the Heritage Keepers, as it was called at the time, Eco-Bio. We had a little programme. So I told these kids in Carlin, a really remote little village in Ireland, about the orchids that they have in the Burren, and they were just amazed that these plants should exist. So I said, I'll be back next week to talk about the fauna. Back next week I came to talk about the fauna of the Burren. And these two came running out to me saying, we have to show you something. And into the lawn they took me, and they dismembered a crow. I said, oh God, this isn't a good start to talk about fauna. And used the feathers all along, as you can see there, because it marked out the leaf of the common spotted orchid, which I'd shown, this is kind of dappled leaf. And they wanted to mark it all out. And I said, you guys, you're amazing. You did all that to show me that you've learned so much. And said, it's not about you. Sorry, it's not about you. But the guy with the lawnmower comes on Tuesdays, and we want to make sure that he doesn't chop down our lovely orchids. So that's the power of education and engagement. And that's what we need to do. So thank you very much. There's loads of information on all those projects. I'm sorry for the
Thank you so much, Brendan. That was fantastic. I'm going to keep moving on if I can now, watching the clock as ever. So next we have a guest who is involved in a programme down in the far south of the country, down in Cork, Helen Riddell. I'm reaching out for you, Helen. I hope you're here. Oh, there you are. Helen came all the way up from Bere Island yesterday to be with us today to talk to us about biodiversity and the impact that they're having on their community and the island of Bere Island. Thank you, Helen. Work away. I'll change your water here.
Am I just to set ours up? Is it? Have a look. Is our presentation on?
Okay. I'm now open. There you go. They
no.
have you there.
No, that's not. No.
Well, that's not yours, is it? Okay.
It's just our logo on the front cover.
I think they're working on it down there. I don't actually know myself. Bere Island.
Perfect, there we are.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you. Good morning, I'm Helen Riddell from Bere Island Projects Group. We're a community group based on Bere Island in West Cork, and I'm delighted to be here today to tell you about the work we're doing. Bere Island is the largest of the West Cork Islands. We're at the mouth of Bantry Bay. The island is 11 kilometres by 5 kilometres. It's served by 2 car ferries and full-time population of just under 200, but this can treble over the next few months. Castletownbere is our nearest mainland town. There's a national school on the island with about 17 pupils, and secondary level students travel to Castletownbere by ferry every day. And the main industries on the island are farming, fishing and tourism. Bere Island Projects Group, it's a community group. It was formed in 1987, and at the time it was formed to support the community and to raise awareness and address issues on access to the island and infrastructure on the island. It's evolved over time. We support a number of initiatives now and various community groups. It's run by a voluntary committee of 8 island residents who change over every 3 years. And with funding from the Department of Community and Rural Development, the group employs 3 permanent staff members, and they run an office which is open 5 days a week. My role is to implement an annual work plan of actions for the Bere Island Conservation Plan, which I'll explain later, and that's funded on a yearly basis through the Heritage Council's Heritage Capacity Fund. These are some of the achievements we've carried out at the projects group over the years. We restored our island national school with the former school with Interreg funding to a state-of-the-art heritage centre and exhibition centre. It was opened by President McAleese in 2010. We formed an aquaculture cooperative, supported islanders to gain licences to grow oysters, seaweed and scallops. We work with an internship project with the university in the Netherlands on rural development to bring students over to work in various biodiversity heritage projects with us. We hosted the first ever Irish Islands BioBlitz in 2016, which we won. We were delighted. And we undertook a dark sky feasibility study with funding from the Heritage Council to look at extending our tourism season and protecting the island skies. We're developing one of our main heritage sites, which I'll explain about. We were a finalist in the National Lottery Good Causes Awards in 2019, and I found out last week we've won the county awards for this year's competition. We have a full decade of centenaries programme, and our group also took on responsibility for community work on Shuilleabhain, Hare, Long, Whiddy and Dursey Islands. We were asked to do that. Now we just look after Whiddy and Dursey at the moment. And we launched the Walkway scheme with the Bere Breffni Way, working with farmers to improve biodiversity on their lands, to save biodiversity and allow access onto the lands. The conservation plan really guides everything we do. And in 2003, with support from the Heritage Council and following consultations with the community, we launched the conservation plan. At the time, the population was in serious decline and little had been done to preserve the island's heritage, to document the heritage, and islanders were concerned about future developments, the impact it would have on the landscape. So Bere Island Projects Group approached the Heritage Council and Cork County Council, and over a period of 3 years, the Bere Island Conservation Plan was formulated as a blueprint for the island's future. And conservation plans first came to prominence in Australia as a way of restoring and preserving a designated area's landscape. So we felt Bere Island was an ideal candidate for that. And a key feature of the plan that was from day one and all the way through it, the community has input and guidance over what happens. Just a brief, that was the main background to the plan, that people can live and work to their own satisfaction. We build on traditional skills, and economic development goes hand in hand. We obviously need to create employment on the island to keep people living there. And as I said, the community has influence over everything. Just a brief background on our heritage. The island's been described as an open-air museum. There's a Bronze Age wedge tomb, a standing stone which is said to mark the exact centre of the island. There's a Viking harbour, and there's 2 remaining Martello towers. There were 4 towers on the island. Bere Island is probably best known for its military heritage. It's said to be the best preserved military landscapes in West Cork since the Battle of Bantry Bay in 1600s and the further invasion by the French Armada with Wolfe Tone in 1796. The British Admiralty realised the strategic importance of Berehaven Harbour for maritime security. So in the late 1800s, they purchased the entire end of the eastern end of the island to create gun batteries, military fortifications. Top picture is the British fleet anchored in the harbour during World War I. The bottom one, there was an internment camp on the island in 1920, and following the signing of the Anglo-Irish Treaty, Bere Island actually remained under British control as one of the treaty ports until 1938, and that pictures the handover of the forts. And the island is still used by the Irish Defence Forces, who our group, we work with them quite a good bit in initiatives. As I said, there's 7 gun batteries on the island. One of the key recommendations of the conservation plan was the restoration of the largest one, Lone Hawk Battery, which is surrounded by a large moat. And it was owned by the Department of Defence, so our group, we obtained a licence to develop the battery. But it's not just about the military structure, it's the flora and fauna of the battery. We had a full ecological study taken, and when we first started working on the battery, it was just, we couldn't even get in there. It was just covered in briars and gorse and overgrowth. So rather than manually remove that, we put in a herd of goats to graze it first, and they're still our gardening team. We've kind of we've sectioned it off. Part of the battery is now open to the public, so we can kind of let the goats in and out to graze, and it's worked really well, as I say. And it's not just about the military heritage. We're going to utilise the battery as an art space and green the parade ground. We hope to do something for the community to enjoy, and again to preserve the flora and fauna there. The landscape of Bere Island, the conservation plan was to set out to protect the landscape and just to stop too much development. So tourism is one of our main industries, and it's in our benefit to protect the landscape. And as I say, it's the night skies as well. And that's when we undertook the dark sky feasibility study, and that was a picture taken at an astronomy event we had at one of the Martello Towers. So we're bringing heritage into all our works. The key policies of the conservation plan for heritage was to conserve the diversity of habitat on the island, conserve our marine environment, adopt a waste management strategy. Waste is a huge issue in all the Irish islands, and encourage a sense of pride of place. The habitats and species. This picture was actually taken last week beside one of the guns in the gun battery. So it's there's sort of, it's, as I say, we're keen to bring everything in, not just the military heritage. So we had the Island BioBlitz competition in 2016, and we recorded 1,178 species That was with help with experts and the island community recording stuff. We hold regular events for the National Parks and Wildlife Service, and we do nature walks as well with the Active Retirement Group. We're very keen to bring in the islanders and their stories of folklore and biodiversity, which visitors really love to hear that. So we've got 4 resident beekeepers on the island, so we work with them. We hold beekeeping talks and events during Heritage Week, and community involvement in treating invasive species. Unfortunately, we have a problem with Japanese knotweed and gonorrhea. So back in 2008, when that was recognised, we did an awareness campaign. We sent flyers to every household asking people just information about the species, telling them to look out in their land and contact us. And then we mapped where these outbreaks were across the island. And with funding from the Heritage Council and Cork County Council over the years, we've managed to treat these, and we've now got an ongoing eradication programme. And one islander undertook training to do this, so it's provided employment for him. And we have a potential problem with rhododendron coverage, which we're starting to monitor that. But unfortunately, we had to treat the Japanese knotweed with Roundup Bioactive. We didn't really want to, but we researched, but there wasn't any cultural way of doing that. But I'd say we're open to, we do want to kind of see if we can do. But the marine environment, as an island community, the sea surrounding us is not just our access route to the mainland, it sustains our island fishers and marine tourism. So we supported a group of islanders in developing an aquaculture cooperative to grow oysters and assisted them in obtaining licences. We organise regular beach cleanups with the community, and to create awareness of the plastics and the stuff that's washed up in the beach, we work with local artists. That's an installation we put in various piers by an artist, Benedict Coleman, just to kind of highlight that's what you find there. As I said, waste management is a big issue on the landscape. So part of the conservation plan was to set up a waste management strategy. So with Leader funding, we built a state-of-the-art recycling centre on one of the piers. Again, cost in taking the recycling off the island. So we bought an industrial paper shredder. So the paper is now used for animal feed, or bedding rather. We've got a glass crusher. The crushed glass can be used in building and gardening. And we also work with local artists. They made a nest installation in one of the gun batteries using some of our crushed glass from the island. And we also take scrap cars off the island on a regular basis, and we have a white goods collection on a yearly basis. Pride of place is a huge part of our work in protecting our biodiversity and involving the community. And we regularly take part in the Tidy Islands competition, and we've won the Tidy Towns competition, and we've won the Tidy Islands Award for 13 consecutive years, so fingers crossed for this year. And this, again, we work with a local school, and this planter was made at the children's playground. It was an old mussel barrel fisherman donated to us. So cut in half, and the children painted it and planted it up with pollinator plants. So we were kind of used to recycle and reuse things wherever we can. And the conservation plan won the European Landscape Award in 2013. And again, community involvement in biodiversity during the pandemic. It was throughout the wider Bere Peninsula. We started a Bere 3K a day. It started off as an exercise just to get people out walking, 3K every day during lockdown. And then it evolved into encouraging people to note their local heritage. We started a dedicated Facebook page just to post heritage updates and also record any plants you saw on your walks. And that's actually still ongoing, which it worked really well. Climate change, unfortunately, we're facing an impact to that. That's a large promontory fort on the south side of the island, Dunbeog. And you can see already there's a significant coastal erosion on the western side, which gets the full brunt of Atlantic storms, and the land bridge onto that, it's noticeably narrowing over the years. I mean, I've been living there 20 years now, and it's already, you can kind of see it's a big change. That's our Viking fort, an aerial view. It's a Norse-made Viking breakwater, and again, rising sea levels will have an impact on that, unfortunately. And that's we did a survey in 2021 as part of the conservation work plan, just to look at all coastal heritage sites and how they were being affected by climate change. Sustainable energy is the way forward for Bere Island and all islands, I think. And a number of islanders formed a sustainable energy community with support from our group, the projects group. And that's just from last year. The usage on the island, obviously transport, we've 2 island ferries. They could have 8 trips a day or more this time of year. So ferries are transport, and a lot of islands have their own boats. So transport is a big thing. And we spent 1.8 million in energy last year. I'm sure it'll be a lot more this year. So future-proofing, we want to install electric charging points for all cars, bikes and boats. We've already installed PV panels on our recycling centre, so it's run entirely on sustainable energy, renewable energy, and we want to do the same for all community buildings and our offices. We're planning to do that in our office soon. Community engagement is key to the work we're doing and to get the island involved in protecting biodiversity. So we did a tree planting project with island farmers. They made the land available. We sourced the funding to buy the trees and plant wildflowers. And we've rural social scheme workers working with our office. They helped tree planting. We worked with the island school to plant an orchard behind the school. That's the children picking their apples. We work with islanders. We promote biodiversity, backyard biodiversity schemes to record, get everyone recording. As I said, the tidy islands, waste management, beach cleans, and Heritage Week. We run a lot of biodiversity awards to get things going there. But key to getting the word out there is communication. We have an island social media sites. Our website, we do weekly newsletters, texting service. But the big thing in recent years I'm really proud of is we set up a community radio station, Bere Island Community Radio. We launched that with EU grassroots funding, and we now broadcast on an FM network throughout Bere and Sheepshead every Sunday morning and worldwide online. And we got money to give the school their own mixing desk, recording desk. So they record monthly updates, bulletins, and what they're doing in biodiversity in their school garden and produce they're growing and various initiatives. And we're working with transition year students in secondary school to do a module in radio production. It's a future career option. And we interview government ministers, experts. We interviewed Heather Humphrey. She visited the island last year just to get the word out about island initiatives and especially in biodiversity. So the radio station is key to our work and getting the work out there. We have a number of partnerships. We're part of the wider Cogala Lan Nahair and the Irish Islands Federation, West Cork Community Council, West Cork Inter-Agency Group, and the European Small Islands Network. And we've also worked with SAMSO Energy Academy. They're a Danish island who are now run entirely on renewable energy. We've done considerable work with them. The Irish Community Archive Net. We actually got onto the Heritage Keepers programme. We were delighted with that this year. We were one of the groups on it. And our project is to record the oral history of Bere Island, and with key emphasis on farming practices, biodiversity, nature over the years. So we're kind of really getting to grips with that now. And as I say, we've got onto the Irish Community Archive Network, so that will be an online portal to display our oral history. So I think that's a huge project, and it's the way forward to kind of document the stories of island life. The support we need, we face a particular challenge and opportunities because of our geographic and climate conditions. I think to engage and utilise the islanders' knowledge, they know over the years what things work, what don't work, different species, to protect them. And I think to use the islands as a centre of excellence to test and adapt new measures, to work with third level education, establishments, NGOs, throughout the winter months we're quiet, there's accommodation available, use those time of the year, it brings money onto the islands and to get expertise, and we're more than happy to work with groups to protect our island's future. And long-term investment in community programmes. We've had great funding and support from the Heritage Council over the years. We're delighted with that, and other government departments. But I think it's just sometimes we find we're constantly sourcing funding and looking for funds. Whereas if we had long-term investment, it gives us more time to work on our plans and initiatives. And ultimately, the work we do is to protect and preserve our island community. This is a few of us. It's an artist project we work with, and just for the community and to preserve Bere Island for future generations. And thank you. So thank you for talking to me. It's delighted to talk here today. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. That was really super. We're going to continue our theme and tour of beautiful places around our main island of Ireland. Next we have someone from the Wicklow Uplands Council, Brian Dunne. Brian and I have a connection going way back. I started off my career as a wildlife ranger in the Wicklow Mountains National Park and worked with his father many years now in Glenmalure. And I'll leave the floor to you now, Brian. You can. I'm going to change your water here as well. You're all set up there. Okay. Thanks, sir.
Okay, thank you, Lorcan. Just before beginning, I want to say what a privilege it is to be speaking today at this conference. It really is fantastic, and thank you to the Heritage Council for the opportunity to talk about our work. So Wicklow Uplands Council, it's an independent voluntary organisation. first established in 1997 in response to concerns that the local communities were having about developments that were happening in the uplands, but that their voices weren't being heard in those decision-making processes. And I suppose just to explain, when we consider uplands, largely people will think those unenclosed mountain lands above the 300-metre contour line. But Wicklow Uplands Council, we consider the surrounding towns and villages, the people that live and work there, as a vital part of the overall upland landscape. And therefore, our mission is to support the sustainable use of the Wicklow Uplands through consensus and partnership with those who live, work and recreate there. We have a broad membership, and it's divided into 4 different categories, which are farmers and landowners, environment and recreation interest, tourism and economic interest, and community groups. And so we have a large board of directors that are elected every year of 25 individuals from the various panels to represent the different interest groups for the year. So what is it that we do? Well, I suppose the most important thing that we do is representing those views and concerns, as I said, of those who live, work and recreate in the uplands. Our board of directors, they meet monthly, and that serves as a very important forum for bringing together all the diverse different interest groups and to discuss current live issues and come up with solutions and ideas as how they might be addressed. And I suppose the first thing we do is develop consensus between those different interest groups. And consensus is really the cornerstone of what we do, because no decision has been taken by vote by the board of directors since establishment in 1997, and it's something that the board are very, very proud of, because it means that all minority concerns are addressed and no one interest has a louder voice than anyone else. We then participate on a wide range of local and regional committees, and we're constantly representing the views and concerns of those groups. And then probably what we're most known for, and what I'll be speaking about predominantly, is our response by innovative projects and partnerships. And all our projects and partnerships, they're delivered using a bottom-up approach and delivered in partnership with relevant agencies. And that means that the voices of the people on the ground are being heard, and then we also have the expertise and the resources of our partners that can be delivered in to ensure the sustainability of projects as well. And they're very much centred around the promotion and the protection of the upland landscape and its natural heritage. And over the past 20 years, we've delivered numerous different projects. There's been schools programs, there has been outreach awareness programs. We've done a lot of work around walking trails, agreed access routes, facilitating agreements between landowners and other recreational interests. But for the purposes of today, I'm just going to talk about a couple of our larger projects that we're involved with that are particularly biodiversity focused. The first one of these is the PURE project, Protecting Upland Rural Environments. It's a partnership project between 3 local authorities, Wicklow County Council, South Dublin, Dunleary, Caoilte, National Parks and Wildlife Service, and ourselves in Wicklow Uplands Council. It was established back in 2006 to tackle illegal dumping and fly tipping in the upland landscape. It's a huge problem at the time, and it was a growing issue, particularly because of the proximity of the Wicklow Uplands to Dublin. Anyone who would have drove across the Sally Gap would have seen burnt out cars, mattresses, everything. But the project has been hugely successful, and since its establishment, it's actually removed over 3,600 tonnes of illegally dumped waste from the upland landscape. So it's a staggering amount of waste, but at the same time, I'm glad to say that the waste each year is coming down and it's levelling out. I particularly want to mention as well that every year the project, it encourages thousands of volunteers and local community groups to adopt the Pure Mile under the Pure Mile competition. And the Pure Mile competition, it involves keeping a stretch of rural roadside litter free, so different community groups, whether it's in their area or other walking groups, adopt areas in the upland, and they research many of them carry out research projects into the history of it, the local folklore, the flora, the fauna. They produce pamphlets, brochures, websites, Facebook pages. It's a really, really engaging project. And I was just thinking for Brendan as well, you mentioned about the heritage keepers. It's something that definitely I think we could build on there. Moving on then to the next project, and this has just finished up, the Wicklow Deer Management Project. This was a 3-year programme which was funded by the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. So, as we know, deer are a hugely important part of our natural heritage, but without management, their numbers can grow to unsustainable levels. And Wicklow has the highest deer population in the country, and because of that, there are increasingly adverse impacts that we're seeing on habitats such as woodland, priority habitats as well, peatland areas. There's impacts on agriculture and other species as well. So as I was saying, it was a 3-year project. The aim of it was to set up deer management units across the county. So we successfully set up 5 deer management units. And essentially what a deer management unit is, an area of defined area of land where landowners, hunters, other interested parties and stakeholders come together to agree on the management of deer within that area, and it's about having a healthy, sustainable deer population. It's not about trying to remove them, but it's about trying to have a healthy population in balance with the environment that they live. So this brings me on then to the Sustainable Uplands Agri-Environmental Scheme, and this is the biggest project that we've been involved with to date. And just to give a little bit of context, because this project is specifically dealing with those unenclosed mountain lands. As we know, upland habitats deliver a range of ecosystem services, that term that everybody loves, but there's water, food supply, timber, energy, carbon sequestration, you name it, it's all there. And large areas are included within the Wicklow Mountains National Park. They're designated as special areas of conservation, and they're also designated as special protected areas as well due to the presence of birds, particularly peregrine and merlin. And these uplands, they're also providing an important space for recreation activities, a wide range of recreation, and they're an important cultural landscape that have been shaped by the activities of farmers and the people that have lived and worked there for generations. They're increasing awareness, as Brendan commented as well, that these are high nature value farmland areas as well. And there's much more recognition, or growing recognition, I suppose, of that farmers in these areas are managing hugely important habitats. But despite all this, and despite being such an important landscape, there are huge problems, and most of the upland habitats that we're finding are found to be in poor or unfavourable conservation condition. And there's many reasons for this. We've got unregulated fires, we see them in the news all the time. We've got grazing pressure from livestock and that very high deer population. We've got undergrazing that's associated with the decline in active farming activities, and that's a big issue as well. And we have the spread of invasive species such as bracken infestation, rhododendron is getting more predominant all the time. We also have recreational pressures and erosion of peat, and again I suppose those visitor management issues are exacerbated because of our proximity to Dublin and the 1.5 million people living on the doorstep of Wicklow using the Wicklow Uplands every weekend. And so Wicklow Uplands Council had been researching those issues for many, many years, and it really stemmed from a visit to the Burren, this project, the SUAS project, back in 2011, I believe it was, when there was a study visit by Wicklow Uplands Council. The farmers in the area were very concerned about all of these issues, went to the Burren to see what was happening with the programme, and were inspired by what they'd seen. And from that time, they were working, carrying out research into it and wondering what they could do. And I suppose this then is when the SUAS project came to be. And the aim of this project is to address the complex challenges associated with land management in the Wicklow and Dublin uplands. Our aim is to support upland farmers manage their unenclosed mountain lands in a sustainable manner that will improve habitat condition and biodiversity, protect water quality, and support agricultural productivity. And the project is one of the European Innovations Partnership projects that's been funded by the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine under the Rural Development Programme. And so it's been in operation since 2018, and it'll come to a conclusion at the end of this year, 2022. So just to give an idea, because I know the time is short today, and just to give an idea of what's involved with the project, we currently have over 25 sites across the Wicklow Dublin uplands with over 85 farmers involved in this project. The first step of the project is that a detailed ecological baseline survey is carried out by a professional ecologist, and the ecologist walks the sites with the farmers, and that's a really important part of it because she's explaining to them what's there, what's important, why it's important. The range of the commonages, the smallest one I think we have is 60 hectares, up to 650 hectares is the largest one. And each of the individual habitat types on those commonages are all assessed individually. So there's quite a workload in it, but it means that we're getting really strong information back out of it as to the actual condition of the sites. Detailed management plans are then drafted, and they set out actions which farmers can carry out to improve those habitats. And farmers have full input into those management plans, which is a really important part as well, that they are having their say, they get to understand why these actions are being suggested, why they're in there, and that's a really, really crucial part of this, to have them engaged fully from the outset. And then the farmers are remunerated for the actions that they carried out. It is a results-based programme as well, whereby the habitat condition is scored, and then the actions that they carry out, there's additional payments for those actions. And the actions that we've carried out to date, just to give you an idea, the first one, I suppose, is the formation of commonage management groups. And this is to assist in the delivery of plans or of of those management plans on commonage areas. Commonage in Ireland, the majority of Ireland's uplands are managed in common. So you have multiple shareholders farming one piece of ground, whereas with traditional schemes, farmers would have had individual management plans. Whereas for this, in commonage areas, what Sue's project has done, develop one single management plan, and farmers are then working collectively, working together to deliver the actions in that plan. So it makes much more sense that everybody is working together off the one plan. There's a lot of vegetation management activities been carried out, and we're talking about areas of small controlled burning has been done. We have done header cutting, we've done bracken spraying and removal, we've done removal of invasive species as well. We've done gully tree planting on upland watercourses. So to date, we've planted over 5,000 native broadleaf trees along upland watercourses. The aim of this is to stabilise banks, to protect water quality, to prevent any possible runoff even. And also, in the long term, that will hopefully start to develop woodland corridors into the uplands and support biodiversity even further. We've reintroduced cattle grazing across a number of our sites, and that's been really successful through the use of virtual fencing technology. So essentially, the cattle have a collar on them, and you can define an area on your phone or on your through an app, and the cattle are then confined to an area. And it means that grazing can be targeted. It also means then that if there's particular issues such as heavier vegetation or anything like that, the grazing can be targeted onto those areas. We've done drain blocking to re-wet areas and to re-wet bog areas. And most recently, we've done some bare peat revegetation trials as well, and that's in conjunction with Wicklow Mountains National Park. So we have some areas of very extensive areas of bare peat, and what that involves is flying in header from a donor site and spreading the brashing out across it, with the intention then is to stabilise those peat areas, and in the long term then hopefully we'll start to get some regrowth on them. In terms of the impacts, I suppose, of the SUES project in particular, so we have those numerous habitat actions that have been carried out, and that's been absolutely fantastic. And I suppose the results of these can be slow to see, particularly in the uplands, because change takes a long time in the uplands. But really, I suppose what's been most successful, if anything, out of the SUES project has been developing this understanding with the farmers, with the ecologist, with the project manager as well, about the understanding of habitat condition. What is working, what isn't working, and what needs to change. And many of the farmers commented to us that when the ecologists walked the site with them and explained to them why their land was designated, what was special about it, it was the first time that anyone had ever done that for them. And that was a huge outcome, and it was framed in a positive light. Often these areas are coined as, areas of natural constraint, they're marginal land, whereas if they're framed as areas of high nature value and in a positive way, it's much more important and engaging for the farmers as well. And getting commonage farmers working together off those single management plans as well, it makes so much sense rather than having separate plans for everybody, seen as they're farming the same piece of ground. And I suppose particularly as well to mention this developing relationship between the National Parks and Wildlife Service staff in Wicklow and the upland farmers. Like, we've always had a really good working relationship, but this picture in particular here, this is the rangers in Wicklow working together with the farmers on one of the sites to block drains together. It's not a picture you'd often see, farmers and conservation rangers working hand in hand to deliver actions, but here we are, and I suppose it's one of the things that we're especially proud of that's coming out of the project. In terms of the challenges then, I suppose we have, I've mentioned the challenges facing the uplands and the projects and stuff, but I think it's important maybe to mention challenges that we face as an organisation, and without doubt core funding is our biggest challenge. We're currently very gratefully supported by the Heritage Council. We have been from the beginning, and without that support we wouldn't be able to continue our work. We're also supported by Wicklow County Council and through a philanthropic arrangement that's due to expire this year. We haven't got a new one secured yet for next year, but we're working hard on it. And I suppose just maybe it's as Helen has said, we have a long history of project delivery, and we've run from projects and different programmes, but finding core funding is a bigger challenge. Finding project funding it seems to be a much easier thing to do, and I suppose we have the experience of doing that. But we are working hard to find that new arrangement, and that will help us to continue our work and to represent those who live, work and recreate in the uplands. Thank you very much.
Well done, Brian. Thanks a million for that. Okay, we've a change of pace now from travelling the country and some of the wonderful places we have in the island. Now we're going to get a presentation from Dr. Aoibhinn O'Sullivan. Great, sorry. She's going to highlight some of the findings and thoughts she's had about the Citizen Assembly on Biodiversity Loss. Thank you, Aoibhinn.
Thank you.
Get you some more.
I've no findings because we've only just started our work actually, but I'm also conscious with my teacher hat on that everyone's been sitting for a very long time listening to really, really interesting presentations, but I think we all need to maybe share one or two things. So if you want to turn to the person beside you or the person behind you and just say why you chose this particular meeting to come to rather than all the other interesting ones that were going on at this time, just to give yourselves 30 seconds just to break it up a little bit. Thank you, everyone. It's really great to hear the vibrancy in this room and, you know, in the coffee breaks and everything. I didn't have the foresight to come to this conference in 2019 when it was first held, and I'm so delighted that I'm here now. I feel like a complete misnomer because when I hear all of the work that's going on with all these people around the country, I'm literally blown away, and I'm so grateful that there are people like you guys like working to save biodiversity around the country and the heritage around the country, so thank you for that. And as I said, I do feel like a little bit of a misnomer. I have so much to learn. That's why I'm here. I'm really looking forward to meeting as many people as possible and having conversations. But for some strange reason, I was invited to become chair of the Citizens Assembly on Biodiversity Loss. I was telling the story to Niall Donoghue a little bit earlier on. I was doing my shopping in Dunne stores on a Monday afternoon in a frantic way because we didn't do it at the weekend. There was no food in the house, and I got a call. And I literally, one of the first things I said was, I don't think I'm the right person for the job. I don't know enough about biodiversity. And it was Art O'Leary, who's the Secretary General, and looking after it, and he said that's probably great because you will need to learn this all with your Citizens Assembly members. So with that, I am trying to dive into all of this as much as possible, and really what I'm here for today is to tell you about the Citizens Assembly and biodiversity loss, to hopefully bring you with us, because we need all the people who are already working in this space to communicate with the group. My job, I feel that because there's so much happening in terms of the National Biodiversity Action Plan, all the things that are happening in the department at the moment, what's the role of the Citizens Assembly? I really feel like it's to get the whole country on board with it, and we need everyone to do that with us. So any ideas, please share them with me, but I'm just going to tell you guys today what we're doing so far and what my vision is, and I'm very happy to hear more ideas on that. This is a picture of one of my favourite places in the world, which is Lorcan, which is basically where I'm from, but I'm actually from down the road in Mayo, but my granny and granddad are from Caitriona, and that's where my dad lives now. So this for me is home, and now that I'm thinking about biodiversity more and more, I realise that, you know, it's so much part of my world and my life. I'm so grateful to my dad for introducing me to nature, but I'm just going to try and thread that through my presentation as well. So first of all, what is a Citizens Assembly? And I'm sure you all know of it. I wanted to read more. I'm an academic. I'm in UCD. My main thing is teacher education. I was a maths and physics teacher, and now I train all the undergraduate maths and science teachers in UCD. It's my programme. I'm very proud of it. But when I was looking at the Citizens Assembly, it was like, right, I need to learn all about this. And I'm fascinated that this instrument of deliberative democracy has been invented, I guess, to really try and inject more energy into democracy. We see that it's being weakened all over the world, but actually deliberative democracy, and we're calling it a Citizens Assembly, is just an instrument to try and bring the general population into policy making and into those conversations. It's increasingly used worldwide. And it began in the 1980s, but the most prominent example is 2004 from British Columbia in Canada, where they wanted to propose a new electoral system for the province. And in the last decade, I had the numbers on my notes, and I can't see them right now, but I think there's something like over 600 deliberative democracies have been held around the world. So much so that the OECD now has a guide about how to do it and how to make sure it's being done properly, as in an independent valuation of it as well. So there's something that we've just joined in on with our first constitutional convention, and now we've got a couple going on right now, actually. Why are they important? First of all, they are representative of society. I watched the Dáil debate when the Citizens' Assembly on Biodiversity Loss and the Dublin elected mayor was proposed in February. And to my horror, it was, but not surprising, some TDs are saying this is a complete waste of time. We are the elected representatives and we make the policy. And I just find that a little bit surprising because the Citizens' Assembly is just more representative of society, in my personal opinion, because we have 18 to 24-year-olds, we have the retirees, we have a gender balance, things that don't exist with our policymakers right now. So for one reason, I think it's more representative. But the second thing is it delivers a well-informed opinion, as opposed to raw opinions captured in polls. It's not a Twitter poll. Citizens' Assembly takes time to do it properly. We are getting, as the biodiversity loss, we're getting more time than any of the Citizens' Assemblies have previously. Because it's such a massive, massive subject to try and do. So we're getting well-informed opinion. And actually some politicians in that debate said, I'm so glad we're having a Citizens' Assembly because I don't have time to go through all the detail and make these decisions. So I'm really glad that somebody is giving up their time to do that. This is where it's interesting because if you look at the literature, it says, Citizens' Assemblies can kind of move along blocked situations, make something finally governable. And I imagine, repealing the 8th Amendment was something there. I think with the biodiversity loss, again, we're highlighting it as this is important now to capture that momentum. So we're giving, hopefully, government the movement to say that, the people have spoken and this is what they want from it. And as we all know, we're the first country, first of all, to have 4 nationwide Citizens' Assemblies so far. And we stand out as a unique case because of all the changes that have come about from our Citizens' Assembly. For example, marriage referendum, repeal the 8th, blasphemy removal, the Climate Action and Low Carbon Development Act, which was published last year as well, came from one of the Citizens' Assembly who were tasked with looking at climate action. So with that, they are thankfully becoming a main reference for deliberative democracy scholars, but also it's something that people in Ireland are more aware of, and government are using it more as a tool to facilitate decision making and to build in more policy, which I think is great. Now, there's a lot of drawbacks to that too, and I'll leave that up to the political scholars to talk about. But for now, I think it's something that we can be proud of. So, as I said, they're evaluated in line with the OECD good practices. This is both the ones happening at the moment that is happening. We're evaluating them in this way. We have an institutional knowledge on the operational elements, which I think is really key. That, for example, our Citizens' Assembly on Biodiversity Loss is not coming from Minister Noonan's department. It's held separately in the Department of An Taoiseach. Why is this important? Because we cannot be accused then of having any bias later on. So similarly, if there were one on education, which is in the programme for government as well, that would not be housed by the Department of Education, and it shouldn't be. It should be independent, and that's something that we can be proud of in Ireland so far and should stand over, as far as I'm aware as well. There is kind of an Irish model of Citizens' Assembly. It is done differently in different places, but the Irish model is slightly different in that the chairperson has a very different role to what it would have in a different place. So in Scotland, for their Citizens' Assembly on Climate Change, they had a convener, but the convener's role is more as a front-facing to media and making sure that all the Assembly members are really enjoying their experience. The chair has more to do with the content and the expert advisory group as well as doing that. So I'm finding all this out and I'm enjoying it. But criticisms and on the Irish one are that like the government actually is deciding all the topics of focus, but maybe there's pros to that as well. So there's lots to discuss if we're talking about that. Focusing specifically on the biodiversity one, this is our family portrait from our first meeting in May on May 14th. How were they chosen? 20,000 households were sent letters through on post. This is different to before. Before it was done through marketing agency. Okay, so this is different. 20,000 letters got 20,000 households got a letter. They said you can decide who you want to be the representative, and over 2,300 responses came back. I think that's amazing. Irish people are amazing. This many people said I'm willing to give up 6 weekends of my year to do this for the rest of the country. And so from those, 99 were chosen as representative of Irish society based on the CSO population data. So kind of like stratified sampling to make sure we have this many women, this many 18 this many retirees. Within that, we've got our gender split, 23 people from Munster, we've got 4 farmers, we've got 12 18 to 24-year-olds, 19 65-plus-year-olds, a couple of beekeepers are in there, we have one Ukrainian national, we have somebody from direct provision, and I'm meeting all these people on the lunch times. One guy came from his last law exam in UCD to be part of the deliberative democracy, originally from India, and he was just like, oh, I heard about deliberative democracy in my undergrad and I wanted to find out more about it. So it's a great broad representation of Irish people. We have principles that we are operating by, and they came from the first Citizens' Assembly, which was chaired by Tom Arnold. Openness, fairness, equality of voice, respect, efficiency and collegiality. They sound like fairly standard things that you might consider, but they're really the things that we're going to be holding for all of our meetings, so that making sure everyone gets a voice. How do we make sure that? There's a lot of talking that happens in a Citizens' Assembly. We'll have a presentation, but then we'll talk for twice as long as the presentation. And all of that is facilitated by a professional facilitator, and there is a professional note taker. All those notes are then collated during that evening and kind of summarised and then brought back, and then we think, okay, well actually there's a lot of questions this, we're going to need to have another talk on that part because there was a lot of things coming out about that. People have requested more information on this, we'll follow that up in the next weekend. So there's a lot of work that goes in that, but it's all open. Everything is going to be streamed online. All submissions that we get will be available online, and yeah, we're going to try and make it as transparent as possible. The role of the chair, as I said, I'm finding it out. I'm finding that it's mostly about balance, because I'm kind of in the middle of our secretariat who know how this works and have great ideas, and our expert advisory group who are experts on content, and balancing that, and also balancing my steering group from the Citizens' Assembly members. There's a representative group of 6 who were voted on to communicate the needs of the Assembly. So my role is kind of balancing, but I'm also the 100th member of the Assembly. When we vote, and we will come up with our recommendations towards the end of our meetings, and we will vote on them. And if there's a split vote, I get the casting vote. So I'm the 100th member of the Assembly. So yeah, I'm the kind of, I'm equal to everybody, but a little bit more equal. If that doesn't make any sense, that's apparently what that means. And yeah, the nexus between everybody, between the members, the expert advisor group and the secretariat, is something I'm very much enjoying, but it's a lot of work, which I hadn't totally expected taking it on. Our terms of reference are, well, we've been asked to examine how the state can improve its response to the issue of biodiversity loss and to bring forward proposals in that regard. That's my mantra. That's the thing that I have to look at. So our terms of reference, which we've been given, are we have to look at where we fit in the biodiversity emergency nationally and globally. What are the threats and what are the opportunities to that? What are the main drivers of biodiversity loss, their impact and the opportunities of addressing them? The perspectives of the general public, representative groups, advocacy groups, experts and policymakers. So these are all the things that I feel that, you know, the stuff that we'll cover in the introductory content, as in like, this is our introduction to what biodiversity is. And I've included a lovely photo of the mayfly, which is something that, you know, it's in our calendar at home. We fish the carb, we fished the cara. And just to keep all this in mind, I think to kind of have our own little touch points of what does it mean to us. So 5, 6 and 7 for me are the key elements of our work in the Citizens' Assembly. Develop greater policy coherence and strategic synergies between biodiversity policy and other policy priorities, including but not limited to all those. That's a massive statement in and of itself. So we're going to need to get the experts to tell us what policies are there, where are the gaps, and then we can maybe look at, okay, well, what could be done a little bit better. Promote greater public understanding and support for this. And I think this is going to be key, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then opportunities to improve the state's response to the challenge of biodiversity loss, how to resource it and how to implement it, okay? So for me, these are going to be like the core elements of our recommendations. I feel like 6, while initially I didn't think that it was that important, now I think it's actually the most important. Because I've read some research to say the more people know about the content of a Citizens' Assembly, the more likely there are to be impacts from it. So the more we get the general public aware of the Citizens' Assembly, the more likely they are to follow the work of it and to really tune into the recommendations. And if they tune into the recommendations, they're more likely to talk to their local TDs about it and make sure stuff is actually implementing it. So I'm actually going to give you all a job today, that when you leave here and you talk about the conference, that you also remind people, do you know there's a citizens' assembly going on? Just so it's happening, because this is how it happens. It's grassroots and it's community. So talk about it, talk about the citizens' assembly, and tune in to our online meetings when they'll happen over the autumn. And 5 and 7, I'm in talks with our expert advisory group. We're having a meeting tomorrow. And we're going to figure out, how do we frame biodiversity loss, looking at the threats, opportunities, challenges, and things we might implement, so that we can cover these two in the 4 weekends of work that we will have over the autumn. So this is our expert advisory group, and we have potential to add in a few more people if we need it. But you can read their names there. Taz Crow, you might have seen him already at the conference today. He's a colleague in UCD, and he's also chairing the National Biodiversity Action Plan, the 4th draft. Mary Dobbs is in Maynooth, and it's her legal expertise. It's agricultural policy and law. Clodagh Harris is an expert on deliberative democracy. We have James Moran from Atlantic Technological University, Mayo. He actually is from down the road, but I'd never met him previously, and he's kind of our agri expert, our CAP expert. Jennifer McElwain, a very prominent botanist. And we have Micheál Caneja as well, who you will have heard being referenced in terms of the NPWS review that was done, and he's also, very experienced in marine and things like that, and also agriculture. I mean, all of these people are experienced in this general world, so I'm very, very, very delighted to have them on board to guide the thinking and the work of the Citizens' Assembly. So we had our first meeting in May, and really in that it was like, what is biodiversity? What's the problem? And what do we have to lose in Ireland and in the world as well? That's what we were really looking at. Saturday we're having a field trip. So what does biodiversity loss and protection look like? We're going to Turvey Park, which is protected by the local authority. I think it's Fingal. Then we're going to Bull Island, and we're also going to Dublin Port as an industry that really is trying to manage biodiversity well. We're also asking our members to engage with Farming for Nature and to go on trips over the summer so that they can also visit farms and get an insight into that as well. Over the autumn, we'll have 4 full weekends listening to the research scientists, the public officers, the volunteer groups, advocates, and maybe some of you guys as well. I would like that to happen. And then we will make recommendations based on the information we hear. We'll be voting on those. It's the last weekend in November, and then I will have to scramble together. Well, not scramble, because we'll have been working on it all autumn, but we'll put together our report with those recommendations to give to An Taoiseach. I'm so delighted to see An Taoiseach here, because I really think he will take them seriously. We have to make sure whoever the next Taoiseach is also takes it seriously, and for that reason we need the public. So this is your threads of conversation that will go out about the Citizens' Assembly. Just to give a lowdown on what did we look at on May 14th. We had Robert Watson address the audience. Ferdy and Marnell from MPWS told a lovely story about, the red squirrel, and actually the comeback of the pine marten, who was only protected in the 80s. I may have details wrong in this, and if I am, I'm sorry. Who suddenly realised that they liked the taste of the grey squirrel, and now we've got the red squirrel coming back like that. Obviously, I am summarising that terribly. I will do my homework on that very well. But I do think the stories like this are going to be key to bring this to the public who don't know that they love biodiversity yet. We've got to bring them on board. And also as well, Jane Stout and really spoke to us about, like, biodiversity is leading to degradation in human health, because it's all part and parcel of the same thing. And again, we need to talk more about that too, because if we're destroying habitats, the animals have no choice but to live with us closer. And what's happening then we're going to get more diseases like COVID-19, unfortunately. So we are inviting submissions. We do want as broad an engagement as possible. If you go to the website, which I should have put up there, I do apologise, citizensassembly.ie, you can email submissions to us. It's open now. We won't actually be looking at them until September. It's open until November, but I really do think try and get them in kind of before September, because I'd like to incorporate as many submissions as possible in our work over the autumn. And I'm asking our members as well to, take photos in their world around them and hashtag CA BioLoss. And Ella gave us a task of doing that and in our first meeting as well, just to really record what is around us. Okay. We're also engaging with stakeholders. Invitations have gone out to stakeholders through Aoibhinn, and we're meeting on Monday. And why? Because we want to involve as many views as possible, and we don't want anyone at the end of all of this, when we publish our recommendations, to say, well, you never involved us, so we can't take this seriously. It was actually, no, we invited everybody to take part in this. Everybody's got skin in the game, whether they realise it or not. As referenced a lot, we'll have a Children and Young People's Assembly. I'm sorry, I'm overtime. Sorry. Will be happening. That's the framework that they'll be using. They're currently recruiting a Children and Young People's Advisory team. I've been asked to share the QR code. It's only open until next week. And that advisory team will then guide the wider work of that assembly. And we're working with them at the moment. We're hoping that their timeline will fit in with ours, so that the findings of the Children and Young People Biodiversity Assembly will feed into ours as well, because we really do want that intergenerational conversation. It's so important the kids are involved. My own 3-year-old is telling me about bees, and I haven't been teaching him. He's been learning about it in creche, so we have to get the young people in on this. So we're not connected, as I said this before, and the assemblies are building on one another. We're learning each time. I wanted to put this up because my dad is rewilding his land, and he didn't really tell me about it until this all popped up. And this is a carnivorous plant, a native Irish plant that I didn't know we had any. And just look at it's on his land now. It's amazing. I can't. Sundew, is that what it's called? Yeah. So I'm learning. What can I bring? I'm really hoping that my background in maths and physics will hopefully input in this, because one thing that I loved when I did my undergrad was fluid dynamics and chaos, and the fact that one small perturbation at the beginning of a system really impacts what happens later. And I want to get that across. A small difference in populations and one end of the scale is really going to make a difference otherwise. So I'm hopeful that I'll be able to maybe work some metaphors through or like that with my education hat on as a teacher educator, and with my experience in public engagement. I'm hoping that will be useful in some way for the Citizens' Assembly, and I really want us all to be able to tell the stories, to bring the value of biodiversity to the people who don't know it yet. The first photo there is a picture of the laneway down to the boathouse that my granddad had, and we use it now. And my dad took out all the rhododendrons, and I didn't speak to him for weeks, because I was just like, this is part of our childhood. I can't believe you tore down this beautiful pathway. It usually would all flower with the purple flowers. I can't believe you did that without telling anybody. And obviously we're on the same page now, because it's not good that it's there, and we have the walkway and it's beautiful, and Dad's planting broadleafs and it's much nicer. But telling the stories, this all matters, and everyone feels very emotional about it. So we tell the stories like that. And this is a picture of Loch Cara, where again we'd go out in the boat as kids all the time, and swim in it. And there's no fish there now, but it's now part of one of the life projects that's just been funded since December. And hopefully we'll see the lake coming back to life. So that's telling the stories. I really hope that we can communicate the recommendations widely. I will do that as much as I can to media and to the broader publics. We'll present it to government. I would like it to be implemented. Hopefully we'll get public engagement and buy-in. And I really, really hope that this Citizens' Assembly, we're not going to get this false dichotomy between rural and urban voices. I actually think the whole storyline of that is manufactured by interest groups. It's not real. I'm a rural person, but I live in Dublin. I think that's, part and parcel of just people's lives in Ireland in general. It's not one or the other. We can be everything, and it's not one against the other. It's just about having the right conversations. And my work won't end when the report and the recommendations are presented. I've already asked that I can stay on to make sure that they get implemented as well. So I'll do my best in that. So thank you all very much, and thank you for welcoming into the space that I don't know very well. Very happy to learn. Please do get in touch. Please include submissions if you can. And thank my husband and my father for all of the photographs used to show the presentation as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, I know we're coming close to coffee, so we've one last presentation, and I won't delay. Are we set up down below for that? We're all good to go. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Caitriona Carlin, who's based in NUIG, and she's going to bring us through some of the research she's done in relation to wellbeing, biodiversity and eco-anxiety. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Lorcan. And while I just check up about sharing my screen, I'm going to get to do something very similar to what Aoibhinn just did. Turn to the person next to you or move around the room and just talk about the place where you like to go. Is it a woodland? Is it a meadow? Is it Loch Carb? And if you can do that for probably less than a minute, I will just ask, do I share my screen?
I'll get away from the bottom of the room there.
I'm pretty sure.
Yes,
I'm pretty sure I do have to.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So I'm going to get you to come back to me now, and I'm going to, wow, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about the Near Health Project and to join some of the threads that we heard about this morning in terms of biodiversity, culture and social well-being. And similar to Aoibhinn, I'm going to bring you back to Loch Carb because it's just down the road from where I live. I'm speaking as one voice, but I'm also representing the other researchers on the project, the communities, the organisations, the participants and the funders, and I want to acknowledge that here now. One of the things that we'll go on a journey before you go to your coffee, what is the relationship between the environment and health? What are these healthy places? What is the relationship between nature and our health and well-being? And in focusing on the research that we carried out, I'll tell you what we heard people tell us about what mattered to them, and then how we use that to inform our nature-based programs, and how we drew all of our research findings into a toolkit for communities and individuals and organisations to use as legacy. And then also how people could use that to work together, act now for nature, as is the theme of this conference. So we all know that health is about a complete emphasis on physical, mental and social well-being. That's a definition that's readily accepted, but for a lot of people, you know, for scientists, we know what biodiversity is. We can count it, we can measure it, we look at it at different levels. But nature means many more different things to people. It has physical entities, it has philosophical entities, it has an artistic lens, it has an inspirational lens. So one very simple way to look on that is to think about, from a selfish perspective, what does it do for us? Nature is important in its own right, but if we think about it in terms of what it does for us, in particular focusing on the cultural associations, how it inspires us, how it's the place where we spend time, how we can be inspired to write, create music, to write poetry, to make things. We also then need to think about the resilience of these systems. And we talk about resilience very much in terms of to be able to bounce back to something. But look at what we've learned from the last 2 years. Actually, what we really need is to be able to be strong and to be hopeful and to be courageous, to learn from these disturbances and the shocks of COVID pandemic and other things like the climate and biodiversity crisis that we're living through. How to be creative, how to be innovative, and to think about doing things differently. That opportunity is there to reach out and grasp, to be able to flourish. But thinking about it very much as we are part of nature, nature is part of us. We are one socio-ecological system. We can look at this in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, but it's actually much more simple to think again back, as Brendan said, where we are in our place, whether it's Loch Carb or the Burren or the Wicklow Mountains or islands off Cork. It is what we eat, what we drink, what we breathe. It is where we live, where we work, where we play, where we rest. It is where we seek solace when we are disturbed and upset. And recognising this really close relationship between health and wellbeing, the EPA and the HSE came together to fund 3 projects. Tyke McIntyre talked about Go Green Routes yesterday. So some of this is a little bit similar with green blue infrastructure for health at Maynooth, near health, nature and environment to attain and restore health at NUI Galway, and then eco health at UCD. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the toolkit later on and how that's informing the work that we're doing with students in terms of eco-anxiety, but also how, as from a personal family level, how we're learning how important nature is in supporting us and succouring us when we're living through trauma. And one of the really interesting things is, go back to the question that I asked you and stand up now if the place that you talked about was a woodland or a meadow or a park or a garden or a forest. Look around, wave at yourselves. Now stand up if you talked about a place that's a river or a canal or a stream or a lake or a sea or a coast or a wetland like a bog. Look around and wave at yourselves. And how many of you said both? Because we have this really funny way of looking on things, and we like to draw lines and we call things green spaces and we call things blue spaces, but when you look at them, they're all multicolored and multi-sensory and multi-textured. And how we make space for these places is going to change throughout our life, because of course our life changes. So what is the health benefit that we know from the evidence right throughout our lifespan, from birth towards the end of life? There's some really important influential factors there, and that's how close are these places to us? What features do they have? How diverse are they? Even to the extent of the level of vegetation around where we live or where we work, or whether we're at school or in hospital. And then there are personal factors as well, such as the amount of time we spend in these places and how safe we feel there. In general, research tells us that people live longer in areas that have more green spaces and access to the coast. Well, we're a little small island. A lot of us live within 10 kilometres of the coast, and a lot of us live near green spaces. So you'd think we'd be really healthy, but we're not. Similar trends like the rest of Europe and the rest of the world show us that we have a couple of really interesting things going on. We've had, like much of Europe, changes in our land use over decades. And with that, we've also got increasing urbanisation. More of us live towards the east and in urban areas than in the west. So on one hand, we have social isolation with increasingly busier sedentary lifestyles, but we also have rural depopulation. So we have loneliness at both urban and rural levels. We can also see that from Andy's talk yesterday, we have declines in our protected habitats, our protected species, and we can even look at that in terms of butterflies and birds. So the things that are part of our environment are fragile and are struggling. And we also know that there are increasing levels of eco-anxiety as people try to cope with the implications of climate change and the need to take action, and almost feeling overwhelmed by that. So in terms of the Near Health Project, we first started off by listening to what mattered to people. And the people that we talked to were 21 up to about 84. They were from urban and rural places. They were from a range of different categories of stakeholders, but what was really interesting was that almost all of them had some level of connection with nature, although some interestingly told us that they were both connected and disconnected from nature. So in terms of what mattered to them, what I want you to take away from the next three slides are the speech bubbles that are biggest, boldest and strongest looking, because they are the views that people most strongly agreed with. So they said nature should be accessible to everyone, but it's not. But they also recognized this really important relationship between going outside, spending time in nature, and their health and well-being. In terms of barriers, they identified things like litter and neglected facilities, but they also highlighted that people's perceptions could also hold them back. So how do we overcome these bridges? And one of the things that they were more likely to conserve it and to look after it. But they also said that if the outdoor spaces were easy to access, that would make it easier. So access is a big issue. And this goes back to something Sive talked about yesterday in terms of this social justice aspect, linking access. So once we knew what mattered to people, we were able then to say to them, okay, so you know what's important to you, you know what's going on. What do you want to see in the future? What does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What are you doing there? What are other people doing there? What is going on with the nature? And then working together, again, the participatory process, they were able to identify action plans, short, medium, and long term. And you can take a look at these in the toolkit. But what was really interesting was that regardless of their motivating theme, they identified that these spaces were supportive, they were enabling, they were creative, they were sheltering, they were sustainable, and they were spaces for people and nature. And community gardens came in as something all the way through, whether short-term, long-term. So we thought, well, as well as community gardens, what other things are important to people? So we looked at nature-based activities. I'm not going to go through this sort of framework in detail, but really what I want you to take away was the fact that these were, again, enabling, they were fun, and they gave people the opportunity to experience their relationship with nature in a different way. I'm going to take a few snapshots of some of these nature-based activities, but I'm going to give you some overarching findings first of all. And I'm going to link that with resilience, and you'll see why at the end, because there's a personal story here. And when we think about resilience at an individual or personal level, we're thinking about integrating the body, the mind, the heart, and the soul. So these activities were all community-based. Most of them were going on already long before we got involved. So they're locally led. And what's important is that they weren't all of the same duration. But what we found was that most of these nature-based activities resulted in improved quality of life outcomes. What do I mean by quality of life outcomes? Well, just one example is that it resulted in people feeling less anxious. They felt restored. They felt that they had something to contribute to life. They also felt more connected to nature, to their spaces, to the people around them, and to their community. So now, question that I asked you, I said, when you go outside, what sort of a space is it? And what was really interesting was if people went sea swimming, they weren't just connected to the sea, they were also connected to the woodland. When people went for a walk alongside the woodland, they were also connected to the sea. And I think we have that association. We see nature in its multisensory, multi-purpose, multifunctional mess and complicated loveliness that it is. So beach cleans. All communities get involved with this. This is run by Clean Coastal and Tashka all around the island of Ireland, and it's held by Stealth. There's no stigma associated with it, and people feel a sense of pride in taking care of their space. If you don't have a beach, you can do a walk, as we heard earlier on about the Uplands. You can do these along riverways, you can do these in parks. Using the Biodiversity Trail in NUI Galway, we did a biodiversity walk for people who needed to walk but didn't like walking. And what was really interesting was, as well as significantly increasing their step rate, they came back each week with a pencil and a pen, and they asked us questions. They wanted to know what the plant was. They wanted to know what the butterfly was that we were watching. And it was inspirational for us. We learned so much from it as well. Similar to the beach cleans where we're working as a pro-environmental function, we also looked at making bat boxes with direct provision residences, installing them and then monitoring them. And this grounded people in their space, and it gave them a root and an anchor in a community where they might have felt very lost coming to a new country. So what were the connections across all the projects? Well, there's a really interesting thing about different approaches, different participants. We found evidence of health and well-being benefits from green and blue spaces. But there's a social justice aspect there that's really important. We also found that negative perceptions like litter ran across all 3 projects, but also this important focus on multi-sensory, multi-purpose spaces that are accessible, that are appealing, and that will help us face the challenges ahead. So the toolkit can be used by an individual, it can be used by a community, it can be used by an organisation. You can dip into it. If you want to find out how to connect with your spaces, go to that section. If you want to work with others to take action, go to that section, and there's other resources as well. Please use it. This is just a very quick snapshot of one of the pages about walking. You can see that we've highlighted the resources that people need, what works well, what didn't work so well, because it's important to learn from your mistakes as well. And what will it do for your health and well-being? So I said there's a personal story here, as well as being an academic and ecologist. I'm a family member, I'm a sister. Our lovely brother was in an accident in November 2020, and these are Tommy's words. And he watches the fox outside the window in the National Rehabilitation Hospital, and that fox inspires him to go for walks. But he also emphasised the benefit to his health and well-being as he learns to live with an acquired brain injury. It's about finding peace and being at peace. So then, similar to the Burren story and learning from the likes of Brendan, we've gone on Carbio walks, and I didn't organise it. A local community leader did, and we learned from people about limekilns, about the children's burial grounds, about the stories of the fishing and farming communities. And we listened and learned and loved, because they're all the same space that we all share. And then in terms of NUI Galway, well, we listened to the students. The students told us there's a biodiversity and a climate crisis. They helped inform our sustainability strategy, and we put together an action plan. But now we're looking at how we can actually be actively engaged with the students in terms of not just providing resources like the biodiversity trail or the interpretation panels or the podcast, but also to be active, to be involved in monitoring with their hand lens the little brown hair streak butterfly eggs in wintertime, to look at our bat boxes, to survey for bats, and
Sorry,
lots
Caitriona.
of other activities as well.
Sorry,
Yes.
Caitriona, I have to apologise. We're getting the hand across the throat here. They have to prep for the next session. We've run a bit late on this, so I'm going to have to finish there. Sincere apologies.
Okay, that's fine. I just had, can I leave you with the sound of
Sure,
nature?
yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Okay, I think that's the video. Thank you.